Yeah, dear learners of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, welcome to this session on personality, which is related to your course on organizational behavior. In today's session, we are going to learn about what is personality, what are the various theories of personality, what factors influence personality of an individual. Why this concept is essential is because as a part of organization behavior, an individual's personality has an impact on how the person behaves at workplace. So there are a lot of variables which influence an individual's behavior. The variables can be in the person himself, or the variables can be in the environment around that particular person. When we are looking at the variables which are there in the person, we are talking about the various skills, abilities, perception, attitudes, values, beliefs, ethics, morality which are there in the person. Similarly, when we are talking about the environment which is around the person, we are talking about how the organization itself is, what is the society in which the person lives, the culture which the person follows, the team to which the person belongs in the organizational space, and the personal life of that individual, which is nothing but the family relations and all. All this, the environmental elements and the personal elements, they both have an impact and they shape up the behavior of an individual. So variables which influence an individual behavior, they are in the form of variables which are there within the person and variables which are there in the environment around us. In today's session, let us concentrate on what all are the variables which are there in an individual, which is called as a personality. Now, when we talk about interactional psychology, which is from where organization behavior also has borrowed its literature, we are talking about behavior. Now, what is behavior? Behavior is on a continuous basis how a person is interacting with the other people and how the person is responding to the situations around the person. That is nothing but the behavior. So, in this process, you have got two things. You have the person and then you have the situation. When we talk about the person, we are talking about somebody who can change the situation or somebody who changes because of the situation. So, behavior of an individual can change the situation or the situation can change the behavior. Either ways, you have got the person who plays an essential role there. Similarly, you have got a situation where we talk about the situation itself being objective, or we are talking about a person's subjective view of the situation. So, therefore, the situation can be seen as the situation is, or the situation is seen from an individual's perspective. So, therefore, you talk about behavior, which is continuous interaction which an individual has got with the situation around that particular individual. Now, when we talk about personality, we are talking about relatively stable set of characteristics. We are not saying unstable. We are talking about set of characteristics which an individual has got, which are going to remain with an individual for a long period of time. So, relatively stable set of characteristics which are influencing an individual's behavior. It also refers to how individuals are differing in their character, in their thinking, in their feeling, in their behavior, because God has created each one of us in a different way. So, therefore, the personality is nothing but the way we think, we feel and we behave. And it is also a combination of lot of emotions that we have got, attitudinal and behavioral responses which shape up our behavior. It also depends upon who are the people who are around us and how are we reacting and interacting with those people. So, it is basically the sum total of ways in which an individual is reacting and interacting with the other people. So, therefore, as I said, it is a relatively stable set of characteristics which build up an individual. So, as an individual, how I behave is based on lot of characteristics which are there in me. All those characteristics are called as personality traits, and those traits describe my behavior. That is how is shaping my personality there. Now, when you talk about personality, there are a lot of things which determine each our personality. We determine personality based on heredity. For example, somebody in the family is having obesity, for instance, then the obesity may run through the family for generations together. So you would have the obesity being carried through hereditary. So my personality, which I am talking about, the physical personality here, is shaped through heredity which is there. So therefore these are biological factors which we gain from our ancestors, from our grandparents, from our parents, and they shape up our personality. So you talk about biological factors or heredity which builds our personality. Similarly, we talk about psychological factor. How is our mind made up? As we see, in our families today, we talk about upbringing our children in a very rational way, so that when they become grown up, they are leading a very positive life. So that is nothing but how psychologically they are being impacted when they are children. We talk about, many people who react in a very different way in a situation where we feel that that particular reaction was uncalled for. Now that particular reaction might have come because of the psychological factor which might have shaped up that particular person's personality. So therefore we talk about psychological factor. For example, a child who might have grown in a secure country like India would have a different kind of an upbringing when compared to a child who might be brought up in a war zone. So you talk about the psychological factors which are shaping up the personality, the resilience which is being built, the strength which is being built, or the mental makeup of the individual is determined by the various psychological factors which are there. We talk about impact of parents on the personality of the children. So we talk about, friendly, amicable and loving nature in the family also brings a child in a positive manner. So therefore psychological factors have an impact on the development of personality. Similarly, we talk about environmental factor. Who are there around us, what kind of institutions we belong to, what kind of peer group do we interact with, what kind of influences do we have, who are our reference group. All these groups have a very important role to play when we talk about shaping up our personality. So these are all a part of the environmental factors which are there around us. That also is a major determinant of personality. Then throughout the course of our life, each one of us are learning something through our experiences, learning something through what we see around us. So that particular learning also has got an impact on personality. We also see that individuals change over a period of time. The change might come because they have learned something from the environment which is around them. So all these factors put together, the biological, the psychological, the environmental and the learning related factors, they all have an impact on shaping the personality of an individual. Through literature, there are a lot of theories which have talked about personality. Let us see some of the prominent theories which are there, which has given personality as an important topic in organizational behavior. The very oldest theory which was given by Gordon Allport, who said that personality is nothing but behavior and the patterns of people. That is, depending on what kind of characteristics you have, you behave in that particular manner, and when the behavior is consistent over a period of time, that becomes a pattern. So therefore traits theory talks about how individuals, they are breaking down their behavior patterns into observable traits. We talk about somebody, in an organizational setup, we say that a particular manager is very approachable. So what we have chosen there as a trait is approachability of the person. So that is nothing but a behavior pattern. Whereas some other manager in another department, we may say that the manager is very strict. So we have talked about the pattern in terms of strictness in his behavior. So that way we say that particular trait or a characteristic which is there in that person's behavior. That is called as a traits theory. We talk about people being patient, loyal, holding up integrity, people being very approachable at workplace. So all these traits will pull up or make up the personality of an individual. That is one of the first theories called traits theory which is there. The second theory was given by it's called as psychodynamic theory, which was given by a lot of people. One prominent author who has given psychodynamic theory is Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud talks about three basic elements which make up our mind. So unconsciously there are a lot of things, or subconsciously there are a lot of things which also make up our personality, which sometimes are beyond our recognition as an individual. So within our mind, within our brain, you've got layers in the brain where some of the layers are which we do not understand. Those are called as subconscious determinants of our behavior. So those subconscious determinants are were determined by a lot of authors like Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, Alfred Adler, Erik Erikson. All these people have given psychodynamic theory where they concentrated on what are the unconscious things which are determining our behavior, because subconsciously and unconsciously there are a lot of things which run in our mind and in our mental abilities that we as an individual are also not aware about. So those things also play an important role in shaping up our personality which is there. These are called as psychodynamic theories which are there. Then we talk about Carl Rogers' theory, where he speaks about humanistic theory, where he says personality is also based on how individuals crave, or they are being urged for individual growth and improvement. As people, we all think about our individual growth and individual improvement. So therefore, as human beings, our personality is shaped on account of the urge that we have towards growth and improvement. That is also a theory which is being given. Last theory is one of the evolving theory, which is called as integrative approach to personality, where we are talking about this particular theory was popularly attributed to Will Fleeson and Jaya Vikrame. These people have said that personality is nothing but a combination of all the psychological process of an individual. Everything that may happen with the mental ability, with the mind, with the psychology, with the soul of an individual, which has got an impact on their behavior. So they are trying to integrate, they are trying to talk about all the process together as an integrative approach in understanding personality. So as we see in the literature, we have seen that personality can be viewed as a characteristic, personality is viewed as a subconscious or an unconscious behavior pattern, it is viewed as a crave or an urge for individual growth and improvement, and it is a combination of all the psychological processes which are there. So that way personality theories are determined in literature. One of the other important personality theory was given by lot of authors where expansion also took place. The first author who gave the theory was Fiske in the year 1949. Later on Norman, Smith, Goldberg, McCrae and Costa, they all improved upon this particular theory. This theory is called as the ocean model or the Big Five model of personality. Big Five model or the ocean model, which has got a lot of application in organization behavior. Here they talk about 5 major personality traits. First thing they talk about is openness to experience, where they talk about, as I said, it is also an acronym for ocean. So we begin with openness, which starts with the letter O. So openness to experience will talk about all the interest and the fascinations which an individual have got, intellectualism, artistry, imagination, all those things shape up the personality of an individual. So how open is a person to learning, to new experiences, to new interest and new fascinations, all that plays an important role in shaping up the personality. Then you talk about conscientiousness. Conscientiousness is nothing but how responsible, dependable and organized a person is. So you talk about, dimension of a personality in terms of reliability. Sometimes it so happens that in organizations we see some individuals who are being entrusted with lot of confidential information. This is because of their personality being dependable, being reliable and being persistent. That is how managers end up giving confidential information to work upon that particular to that individual. So you talk about conscientiousness. Then you talk about extroversion, how sociable or how assertive an individual is. It is necessary that in an organization today, when we are working as teams and we are working as groups, that people are sociable, that people are gregarious and assertive, because they have to mingle with one another, they have to adjust with one another, and they have to also tolerate with the pros and cons of behaving with one another. So therefore that extroversion plays an important role in determining personality in an organizational setup. Then you talk about agreeableness, the propensity of an individual to differ with others or to agree with others is nothing but agreeableness. This also talks about how cooperative the person is, how trusting the person is, and how good natured the person is. So agreeability or agreeableness, the dimension of an individual's personality to agree or to differ with other people. Then you talk about emotional stability, where the ability of an individual to withstand stress, because today in modern organization we talk a lot about stress management, where we say how secure, calm, confident, positive person is, or how insecure, negative, depressed, nervous the person is. So these 5 dimensions of personality determines how people behave in an organization. We also call it as ocean theory of personality, because all the first letters begin with the letters related to ocean. For example, open, OCEAN, where we say O stands for openness, C for conscientiousness, E for extroversion, A for agreeability, and N, where we talk about what kind of a stability that particular person has got, the emotions that that particular person has got. And all these has got relevance in organization behavior. It impacts how people think, how people mingle with one another, what kind of a social life they have in an organization, how they are able to achieve targets, what kind of behavioral issues they have, whether they are performing high or low. All that is a part of your applications of the Big 5 model which is there. When we talk about personality, there are a lot of personality attributes which are also influencing how people are behaving at the workplace. Some of the personality attributes which are essentially important to our organization behavior will be highlighted now. One such thing is called as self-evaluation. Now, it is very essential that when people are putting themselves in a workplace, they have to evaluate who they are and what tasks and roles they are good at performing. So, this self-evaluation will help them to understand how capable, how effective they are, and how much control they can have over the environment. People who have got negative self-evaluation, they may actually dislike themselves, they question their abilities, they may also have an inferiority complex in front of the other people who are there working in the team or in the group. So, self-evaluation becomes very important. As a person, you have to understand who you are and conduct something called as a SWOT analysis, where you know your own strength, weaknesses, opportunities and challenges which you face in the workplace. You have an essential element of a personality called narcissism. Narcissism is actually related to admiration of others and receiving affirmation of their superiority. Usually what happens is, people tend to be very selfish, exploitative about others, and they believe that others are existing only for their benefit. Usually bosses at many workplaces, we see that they exploit the workers and then they threaten them, they treat them as if they are inferior. Such a tendency in a personality of an individual is called as narcissism. This particular narcissism is basically because of self-admiration and because of looking at your own superiority, looking at your own benefit and exploiting others for your own benefit as such. That has an essential role to play in shaping personality at the workplace. Then you have a second concept called locus of control, where you talk about the degree to which people are believing that they are masters of their own fate. Sometimes it so happens that we feel that the situation is under our control, and sometimes we feel that the situation is out of our control. So that particular belief that we have that we can control the situation is nothing but locus of control. Sometimes this locus of control can be internal locus or it can be external locus. When people are believing that they can control what can happen to them, that is called as internal locus of control. Sometimes we see that in organizations, some of the team members outrightly say that they will not be able to perform a particular target. Now here, when a superior is entrusting you with a target and you believe that you are not able to perform the target, you are holding the control of the situation. This is called as internal locus of control. When individuals are believing that whatever is happening to them is actually happening because of outside forces or maybe because of luck or a chance, then it is called as external locus of control. Sometimes we end up seeing people who say that I cannot say no, how did you say no to a particular situation? Now saying no or saying yes to a situation was actually your internal locus of control, and sometimes when we put up that particular thrust onto others, we say that was external locus of control as such. So personality Locus of control in the personality also plays an important role. So, self-evaluation, narcissism, locus of control. Then you talk about self-esteem and self-monitoring. Self-esteem is talking about your own worth in your own eyes. How do you see yourself is nothing but self-esteem. So, what kind of a degree of liking do you have towards yourself, or what kind of a dislike do you have towards others? That will determine what is your self-esteem. It is basically talking about self-worth. And self-monitoring is basically talking about measuring individual's ability so that that particular individual can adjust his or her behavior to external environments which are there. So, you monitor yourself and then you check whether you will be able to do that work or not. So, self-esteem and self-monitoring also plays an important role there. When you are feeling self-worth, most of the time people who are very high on self-worth and they believe that they are worth a lot of things and they have a huge respect for their own self, they tend to succeed in life, which also increases their self-worth. Most of the people who have a low self-worth, they look at themselves in a very low way or have got an inferiority among themselves, then such people tend to fail most of the time, which may also add up to decreasing their self-esteem. So, those people who have got very high self-esteem, they succeed, which adds up to their self-esteem. Those people who have got a very low self-esteem, they fail, which also adds up to the more low self-esteem in themselves. So, that way self-esteem has got an important role in shaping up the behavior of an individual. Similarly, self-monitoring also, where we are talking about how we are looking at the behavior from the situation and from the problems. We talk about people who are high self-monitors and low self-monitors. How can you, people who are very high self-monitors, they are very flexible, they adjust in the situations because they have a control over the situation. Those people who are very low self-monitors, basically they are acting from the internal states rather than from the external sources which are there. So, you have got self-evaluation, narcissism, self-esteem and self-worth. Then you have got self-efficacy, which is also an essential element which shapes up the personality. Self-efficacy is basically beliefs and expectations that you will be able to accomplish a particular given task. An individual's belief in oneself that when a task is assigned to me, I will be able to do that particular task. This self-efficacy can come because of lot of prior experiences you may have, prior successes you may have. For example, when an individual is given some work in an organization, the individual may feel that that work he will be able to accomplish very easily because previously he has already done that particular work. So, therefore, you would have self-efficacy which will be very high in individuals based on prior experiences and prior successes which are there, based on your self-motivation, based on your emotional and physical capabilities also, self-efficacy will be improved. Then you also have risk-taking. How risk-taking also shapes up the personality. In organizations, you may have people who can take high levels of risks. You may also have people who may take low levels of risk. When you have people who are taking high risk, they also tend to make quick decisions which are there in the company. They also operate in a very small organizations which are there. But when we talk about people who take low risk, they basically are slow in decision making because they are also working in a very stable and in a large organizational environment. So, propensity to take risk also determines the individual's personality. Then you have got various personality types like type A and type B. Type A people are those people who are always walking, moving, eating very rapidly and they are feeling impatient. They are all the time very impulsive people who cannot cope up with the leisure time. Sometimes we feel people around us who are constantly working. These are all called as type A people. Type B people are those people who never have a sense of emergency or urgency. They work very slowly. They are all people who have got a lot of patience with them. They do not display any kind of a sense of urgency. They work with lot of relaxation and play, and they don't even have a guilt when they are relaxing as such. These are called as type B personality. In organizations, we see that both these types of type A and type B personality are present there. Sometimes you also see people who are proactive, where people are uniquely identifying the opportunities and taking an action before an event actually happens. So, therefore, you talk about proactive personality who are identifying actions and opportunities and taking up action even before that particular situation arises there. And in organizations, when we say strong personalities basically dominate weak personalities which are there. In strong situations, you need people who have strong personality. But all this while we are talking about determinants of personality. But how do you measure personality? Personality can be measured using something called as a projective test. You give a abstract stimuli to an environment, to an individual, and how that individual responds to that stimuli is nothing but your projective test. So, projective test can help an individual's response to a given stimuli. You can also have got behavioral measures where how people are behaving in a particular controlled situation. You observe that behavior and you can measure the personality of a person. Or you can have questionnaires which are readily available, and those questionnaires, when an individual fills the questionnaire, you try to assess what kind of a personality you've got. Major instrument which is used in most of the organizations is Carl Jung's instrument. Author Carl Jung has given theory of individual differences. In that particular theory, he talks about an instrument which helps to measure personality. This is called as Carl Jung's instrument, where it was later developed by Myers and Briggs. Myers and Briggs type indicator, in short form it is called as MBTI. MBTI helps you to measure the personality of an individual. So, Myers and Briggs talks about 16 personality types. They say that all people who have got various personalities, they identified 16 personalities and they grouped these personalities into 4 classes. Those 4 classes are people who are extrovert and introvert, people who are intuitive and sensing, people who think or feel, and people who are judging and perceiving. So, they talked about mixing these 4 personality types and making 16 types of different types of personalities which are there. So, 16 types of personalities were actually observed by them, and they have grouped those 16 types of personalities into these 4 types of personalities. So, Myers and Briggs type indicator, MBTI, which we call, that is based on Carl Jung's work, and they have divided 16 types of personalities into 4 basic types. They talked about extroversion and introversion, where you talk about how a particular person re-energizes, sensing and intuiting, where you talk about how a particular person is gathering the information, thinking and feeling, where you talk about how a person is making a decision. Then you say judging and perceiving, where you are talking about what is your orientation to the outer world, which helps you to make a decision. So, the 16 personality types that they talked about is reserved versus outgoing, intelligent, less and more, affected by feeling, emotionally stable, submissive people, dominant people, serious people, happy-go-lucky type, expedient people, conscientious people, timid people, people who have got venturesome, tough-minded and sensitive ones, trusting and suspicious ones, practical and imaginative people, people who are very shrewd and people who are forthright, people who are conservative and people who experiment, personality types where you can have control and towards them whom you don't have a control, people who are relaxed and who are tense. So, like that, all these 16 types they have grouped into 4 types, and they talked about the 4 basic behaviors which we call as MBTI preferences or an MBTI measure of measuring personality which is there. Now, all this while we are saying personality and determinants of personality and major components which are affecting organization behavior. Let us see how personality models play an important role in organization behavior. There are certain practical applications of personality models where we talk about how these models are used in evaluating employee, in forecasting their job performances, in identifying what is the team composition and shaping up leadership. So, practically how we see personality is when we start evaluating whether the employee is fitting into a particular job or not. So, we talk about employee job fit based on the personality of an individual. Similarly, we talk about job performance based on the personality of the person. We talk about how the person is going to perform the job. Then we talk about how the team is composed of depending on various personalities, we start forming teams in the company. So team composition and also how leaders should be trained in order to handle that team is based on the various personalities which comprise in that particular team. So practical applications of personality models in OB are talking about how employee and job are fitting into one another, how we are forecasting job behavior, facilitating team composition, and talking about shaping leadership training. Personality is also viewed as a diagnostic tool, where we talk about how psychologically we are evaluating an individual, where we are saying that how managers are provided with a deeper understanding of their workforce, so that the managers can make an informed decision about their employees in the company. Similarly, we talk about the Big Five models, Myers and Briggs indicator. We talk about various dysfunctional behaviors in the organization. For all practical purposes, we use all the models of personality in order to identify what kind of applications they have got in organization behavior. So in this session of personality, we have spoken about what is personality, what are the various contributors of personality, that is what things determine personality, where we talk about biological, psychological, environmental and learning factors. Then we have spoken about various theories of personality like traits theory, psychodynamic theory, humanistic theory and integrative theory. Then we have spoken about the essential elements of personality, where we talk about narcissism, self-evaluation, self-control, esteem, monitoring, self-efficacy, risk-taking, type A, type B personalities. Then we have spoken about MTBI, where we talk about Myers and Briggs type indicator, where we talk about in which type of a personality you fit into. Then we have spoken about what are the practical applications which are there in personality as such. So personality is an essential element which actually shapes up the behavior of an individual. As I said, it comprises of various skills, abilities, perception, attitude, values, beliefs, ethics, morality and principles that an individual upholds in their own lives and also the lives that they lead in the organizations as such. Thank you.